Hi, I'm Colleen, and I have been a member of Book of the Month for a couple years. And this video, I am going to rank every single book I've gotten from Book of the Month, from most favorite to least favorite. But of course, we're going to start with least favorite. What's Book of the Month, you ask? Thanks for asking. Book of the Month is a monthly book subscription service. Like it sounds, I'm not sponsored by them, obviously. But if you use the link in the description to sign up, they do give me a free add-on, which would be really nice. So if you love this video and you see 85 books you want to get, please use that link. Thanks. This has been a video that's been a long time coming. I was gonna originally do it when I hit 100, but then I really quickly went past 100 and things just keep going. So right now, I think I'm at 110, but I have a giant spreadsheet and sometimes there's blank lines, and so I'm not 100% sure. I'll try and count at the end of this. I don't know if that's going to happen though. So we're just going to get into it because obviously 110 books is a lot of books to go through. These are not all of them because over the years I have sold some, given some to friends, given many to my sister and to my mom. So I have little post-it notes for the ones that I don't have in my possession anymore, and that will hopefully remind me. And then I have my handy dandy spreadsheet right here. So I do them all in order. But let's just get started. We're going to start with the ones I haven't read yet. I currently have 3 unread Book of the Months, 1 from this month, 1 from earlier this year, and 1 that I've had for a while. Let's start the one that I've had for a while, and it is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am on page 275 of this, and I've been on page 275 for about 2 years. I don't think I'm going to DNF this, but I just haven't been in the mood to pick it up. I made a mistake and started it, I want to say in like January, and this is an autumn book. It's really not a spring book, so by the time March rolled around, I just wasn't really interested anymore in it. I do think I'll finish this at some point. I have no idea when. My second unread is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I've mostly been afraid to start this because The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue made me cry so hard for so long and seriously affected me for many weeks. And I'm worried this book is going to do the same. But I do think I'm going to get to this before the end of 2026. I did buy it in 2025, but I think this is the year. And then lastly, last month, Book of the Month had a deal, if you've been a member for more than a year, that you got to pick one of the 5 finalists for Book of the Year. And I had already read 2 of the finalists, and then Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil was another finalist. So I only had 2 to choose from, and one was a romance, and I tend not to buy Book of the Month romance. I love romance, I just don't usually like what they pick. And so I got The Names by Florence Knapp. I know very little about it, but I do think I'll probably like it since it was up for the Book of the Year. It's on my TBR. I'm going to read this probably before May. Now let's go ahead and get started. I have one book that I sold that I never read or started called Love of My Life by Rosie Walsh. When I bought that, I did not realize it had a cancer plotline, and that was not something I was interested in at the time. So I don't fault that book at all for being a book with a cancer plotline. It just wasn't the right time for me, and I really wish I had known about it beforehand. Several of these in this pile I didn't finish, but I read enough that I felt like I could tell you why. I felt like I could put them in an order of liking to disliking. So my least favorite DNF is Honey by Isabel Banta. In complete honesty, the month that this came out, I didn't like any of the picks, and I would normally skip it, but there was an Ellen Hildebrand as an add-on, I believe Swan Song, and I wanted that book so badly. So I grabbed this knowing it was probably not for me, and it turned out not to be for me. It's a fictionalized story of what it was like to be a pop star in the early 2000s, which is when I was, I graduated high school in 2001. So it was kind of like my end of high school, college experience, but it just wasn't a read for me. Next, I have a post-it for this one because I already sold it, but it's Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati, I think is how you say her name. This one really surprised me because I do really love Greek mythology and really thought that this would be a great book, which is probably why it's low on my list, in that I didn't really like her writing style, and I think I got about 150 pages in, which is usually the rule I make for myself for DNFing, and then just decided it was not for me. Next, I have Bombshell by Darrow Farr. This one I think I got last summer or maybe last May. I can't remember exactly. This is a story of like socialite 17-year-old who gets kidnapped by a bunch of revolutionaries, and she joins their cause. There was a lot of Stockholm Syndrome stuff in a romance between this teenager and this like 25-year-old, which I really didn't like. I gave it 150 pages. A lot of the reviews say the end was great, but I just couldn't stick around. I'm just not one for that kind of age gap in a romance. Next up, I have Babel by R.F. Kuang. I had such a struggle with that book. I know a lot of people absolutely love it, and I'm happy for you, but I just could not get into the story. I read, I think, 200 pages of it and then decided to just let myself tap out. Those are all my DNFs. So now let's get into all the books I actually finished. A lot of these I already sold, but let's start with one I didn't. Shelterwood by Lisa Wingate. This is a book that's told in 2 parts, and to be honest, I really liked one of the parts. For part of it, we're in the 90s following this park ranger who's kind of uncovering this mystery of the past, and I actually liked that part, like enough, not like loved it over the top. And then the other part is the early 1900s in Oklahoma with kids and land barons trying to get train stuff. I don't remember it that well, but this was one of those books that just, it was not for me. And honestly, I picked this one because at the time my son was super into looking up videos of tornadoes in Oklahoma. So like Oklahoma was in my brain, but realistically, that's not really a time period in history that I'm that interested in. Now let's start with all the posted notes because there's a lot in a row. So next is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This was a thriller that I just really didn't like. I can't remember much about it except that it was an author who was being stalked by, she thinks, someone who she gave a bad review to. And I just didn't really like the pacing of the thriller. I ended up skimming to the end because I just wasn't that interested in it. Next, I have Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. And I feel a little bad about this because like the first 200 pages, I really liked this book. And then it just fell off for me. I have a thing with children in books that I feel like if you don't spend time with children and then you write children as main characters, it tends to not ring as true. And I felt like that book kind of suffered with it. I also thought this book would have been great if it was a little bit shorter because I really did like the beginning. I thought the beginning was really strong, but then it sort of faltered for me. Next, I have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I'm not a Colleen Hoover reader. This is the only book by her I've ever read. And she just wasn't my style. I mean, I think people love her. My sister loved It Ends With Us, and I think it read the sequel. But it just wasn't my style of writing. After that, I have The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. That was a book that was really hard for me to pick up. I started it and put it down a bunch of times. And then while I was starting and putting it down, some of my friends and cousins read it and told me they didn't like it, which probably colored my opinion a little bit. But I did force myself to sit down and finish it. And I think this was one that it's a science fiction-y story in which people from the past are brought to the future, and it's about a woman who is sort of taking care of this man from the 1800s who was supposed to die in a shipwreck, I believe, and they fall in love. And I had a hard time buying the romance, which was mainly my issue with it. Next one is the first book I ever bought from Book of the Month, which is Half Stick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian. It's an Arthurian legend retelling, and I really love Arthurian legend. I did my senior thesis in college on it. I've read The Mists of Avalon like 3 or 4 times, which is a problematic book, I know. I read it a lot of times when I was like in my late teens and 20s. But I was just disappointed with this one because I was like really excited to have like a new favorite book. And then it ended up being what I would classify as more of like the show Reign was to Mary Queen of Scots. This was kind of like that to Arthurian legend. Now we're going to move up. In Book of the Month's app or on their website, you can rate your books, dislike, like, love, and those are all my dislikes. So that was actually really great, considering I have so many books still to go, and think of all the post-it notes. Very, very small amount that I didn't like. Next, I have The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I loved The Silent Patient and I loved The Maidens, and this one just didn't have the same magic. We're on an island with a bunch of people who are friends with this famous woman, and it's got a kind of a weird narrative structure where like the narrator is unreliable, but also telling the story almost as if it's a play. And it just didn't work for me very well. I also think that I had read The Silent Patient, I think like 2 months before I read this one, and that might have been a bad idea because that one was just really good. After that, I have The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This is a beautifully written book about horrible things, and it was hard for me to move past the horrible things. It's about a woman who escapes the siege of Jamestown, I want to say, and she's trying to survive in the wilderness alone. And
What I originally recorded was way too spoilery. It's a very gruesome look at life in the woods.
I didn't love that. It was very depressing. After that, I have Beautiful Country by Qin Julie Wang. And I liked this book. I just thought it was a little bit too long. It's a memoir of a woman that she wrote about her childhood as a undocumented immigrant in New York City. I'm pretty sure it's in New York. And I liked a lot of it, but I just thought it was like a little too long. I would have probably enjoyed it a lot more if it was shorter. It just was kind of repetitive. But if you're looking for it's like the 90s, what it's like being sort of like living in this sub community in New York, it was interesting. After that, I have Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. And this is a thriller, and it's about a woman who's a cop, and she gets a call to a crime scene, and then she also at the same time gets, I think it's a text that basically says, this is the person you're gonna pin for this murder, and if you don't pin this person for this murder, then I'm going to tell everyone what your daughter did. And I really liked the setup of it. I just didn't love the ending and how it all played out. Also, I talked about this in earlier reviews. This is one of those times when the differing justice systems between the United States and the UK really come out, because the like reveal of what her daughter had done to me, I was like, I don't think that's illegal in the United States. I mean, it's not good, but I don't think it was like the same. Next, I have Familia by Lauren E. Rico. This is one of those books that like the setting description in it was phenomenal. It takes place mostly in Puerto Rico. It's about a woman who does a ancestry test and finds out she's not actually related to her parents and that she is Puerto Rican. And she goes to this area where she's supposed to have been born and then meets her biological family. It was a little far-fetched. It was one of those, when they say like, fiction has to be believable and nonfiction has to be unbelievable. And it was a little too unbelievable, I felt like, to throw the fiction side. But if you want some good description of Puerto Rico, this book has it. After that, I have The Return of Ellie Black by Emiko Jean. The only reason this is ranked so low is because this was a really hard read for me. It's a thriller about missing teenage girls, and I did not know we were going to get POV of the teenage girls while they're missing, and that was pretty upsetting. So I'm just like, I can read a lot of thrillers, but I have to be careful in terms of like the children teen angle sometimes, because I just get really... I'm a mom. I get really upset. And so I think that if you don't have that, you'd probably really like this thriller, but I have that. And so I just couldn't. It was very upsetting, which I'm sure is what Emiko Jean was going for. Next, I have The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Brianne Randall. This was that book that was huge on social media. I don't remember how long ago it was, a couple years ago. It was before my book came out. So 2023, maybe, no, 2022, I think, around then. Before The Hedge Witch came out, because I got it thinking it might be a comp, and it was not. I thought the description of food, place, that was fantastic. She really built a world, but there were just some things in it that didn't work for me with the both the plot, because there are some tropes in there that are like my least favorite tropes in romance, and then also it bothered me that these women are witches and like Methodists. Kind of bothered me. Next, I have What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez, and I'm going to tell you what. If I were still working as a young adult librarian, which I'm not right now, I would recommend the hell out of this book for YA readers, because it's a great young adult adventure story with mommy vibes. But I don't really read young adult that often anymore. I kind of had too much of it when I was working in the field. And so for me, it was kind of like, oh, I don't actually love this young adult. Now you'll see there are other young adult books, like 3, I think, in this list that I did rank higher, but I'm just not a big young adult reader anymore. But I do think this is great for actual young adult readers who it's meant for. And then next I have The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. I think this one is so low because I kind of had really high hopes for it. It's a book about maps and libraries, which are like 2 of my favorite things. You can't really see, but I have a giant map right there. I have one over there. I love maps, and I am obviously a librarian. There were 2 things that didn't work for me. This is a cool story. It's about like using maps to travel to other places. It was very cool. But a hinge of the plot is that the New York City Public Library is like having funding problems, which just as someone who's worked in public library systems, that'd be almost impossible because they have so many great donors. And there's a part of the book that's a lot about going on these crazy adventures with like a small baby all the time. And that never is a problem. And so that kind of seemed insane. So those are just two things that I had a hard time grappling with. But if you don't care about realistic library funding and you don't care about babies being well-behaved on adventures, you'd probably love it. Next, we've got Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. This is about Bethany Joy Lenz, the woman from One Tree Hill. You might recognize her, and her time in a cult. But as she says at the beginning, her cult is a little bit of a boring cult and mainly just steals money from her. And so it was kind of interesting, but not like one of the more like gripping. I don't read a lot of memoirs. But I've read like her co-stars, Hillary Burton Morgan. I've read her 2 memoirs and I liked both of those more. This was fine though. It was like a middle of the road memoir. And next I have The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I think this is one where everybody told me I was going to absolutely love Lucy Foley, and I read this book and I was like, that was fine. And it felt like it was kind of a fine mystery. I went into it thinking it was a thriller, but it is a mystery. And now I know how to distinguish those in my brain. That thrillers are those you can't put down and you read them in 2 days and they're so much fun, though I think I just read a mystery in 2 days. And mysteries, though, tend to be a little bit more ambling, a little bit more of a puzzle. So I do think if I had that mindset now, I might enjoy this book more. But it's basically about a bunch of people living in an apartment in Paris, and I don't remember the specifics of the mystery that much. And then after that, we have She Started It by Sean Gilbert, I think is how you say her name. This is about a woman who is mercilessly teased horribly in middle school and high school by this group of girls, and then magically invites them to her bachelorette party in the Caribbean, and they all go, and they're from England. And then the people start dying on this island. And I liked parts of the thriller. I guessed the twist really early and was correct. So that was a little bit of a bummer. And I also had a hard time understanding everyone's motivation for actually going. And I felt like you did have to sort of suspend belief of anybody realizing that this woman probably wouldn't like them. But, you know, still a pretty good thriller. Next, I have The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. This is about a group of kids who, when they were teenagers, were in a horrible accident and they survived it, and the secrets they hold, and then they think someone is starting to come after them, and they're all trapped in this beach house where they go every year on the anniversary to spend time together, and you follow all of their perspectives. I liked this. I have a different Megan Miranda that's much higher on the list, so I felt a little bit let down because I was thinking it would be another like favorite thriller of all time. And last for this pile, I have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. This is my 3rd time filming it. I'm not going to do it again. I'm having a really hard time saying her name right now. This is a magical realism story that reads almost like a fairy tale, like a modern day fairy tale. And the writing is very flowery and beautiful. And I did really like this book, but I remember thinking when I read this that this was really like kind of an advertisement for why we shouldn't necessarily try to put stories into publishing acceptable lengths, because I thought if this had been like 100 pages, it would have been like one of my favorite books of the year. But I think it ended up being like 250 pages and it just felt too stretched out for me, but really beautiful writing. Next I have The Lightbreakers by Audrey Gable, and I just read this. This is a book about time travel through memories. And it's very depressing because our main character one of our main characters, we have 2, who is time traveling through his memories, lost a child at only 4 years old. And so a lot of the book centers around his grief about losing his child and his strong desire to get any time he can have back with his child. So it's really sad. So go into know he's really sad. There's also a part about his current wife, Maya, who goes to Japan and sort of visits her own past that way and finds the man who broke her heart. And I really liked that. That was not that depressing, but the majority of this book is pretty depressing. Next, we have The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. This is a book. Sarah Penner's books always like jump. Now I can't remember if the London Sand Society jumps, but this one and The Lost Apothecary definitely jump between time. So I'm going to look up the years because now I can't remember. We're in 1821 and we're also in modern day. And we're following a woman who is like a scuba diver archaeologist, I guess is what you would say. Like you try and find stuff underwater. And a woman who is kind of like a witch whose diary she finds, I think. I'm fuzzy on the details, obviously, because a lot of these books I read a long time ago. But I enjoyed it. It was a fun summertime romp. If you're looking for like a summertime, this is summer. It's summertime. It's Italy. It's beautiful. Not a summertime romp, but I did buy, because I thought it was going to be the book of the summer, I have Home of the American Circus by Allison Larkin. This is a family drama story about a woman who has to go home. She's been living in Maine and she has to go home to upstate New York and reconcile the mess she left behind when she abruptly left. I can't remember exactly how many years it's been, but it's really a story about getting people to forgive you and realizing like the horrible things that happened to you and why you behaved the way you did. Next, I have The Wilder Women by Ruth Emmy Lang. That's a magical realism story. It's one of the first books I got, so I can't remember it very well, but it's about two sisters and I know they're driving all over the United States, and a lot of it takes place in the desert, which I thought was really cool, but I don't remember much else besides that. But it was really desert vibes. If you're looking for desert vibes, get that one. And then I have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which I know a lot of you will be like, why isn't your Leigh Bardugo all the way over here? I just didn't connect that well with this. And we talked about, this isn't a young adult book, but it does take place on a university, and all our narrators are students, or our one narrator. I think there's only one narrator. Oh no, this is the book that jumps in time. So we only have one narrator, but we're bouncing, or does he talk? I know mostly Alex is our narrator, but now I can't remember if her guy friend, whose name is escaping me, is a narrator too. Whatever. This is dark academia if you also have fantasy and science involved. There's one scene in this that was so rough for me that I really couldn't come back from, and then it made me sort of not want to read the book. And so that's why it's this low for me. After that, I have Inkblood Sister Scribe by Emma Torres. This is a cool new look at fantasy, I felt like, and magic systems. In this book, you've got two sisters who are narrators and then a random guy who's a narrator. The sisters are very cool, though the random guy's fine. But one sister has to move constantly because there's some sort of spell that will happen if she ever sits still. And we meet up with her in Antarctica. Amazing. The other sister has to stay home and she's guarding their family house. And the spells and the magic system all have to do with blood and books. And it was pretty cool. It's a little bit more of a quieter fantasy though. You definitely have to get into the world and then the action starts happening. But these sisters were amazing. Next, I have Forget Me Not by Stacey Willingham. This is about a woman whose sister has disappeared 20-ish years ago, and she kind of like finds where her sister had spent her last summer working and then randomly gets hired there. It's like a winery. I thought this was a fun thriller, but this has a lot of, girl, you're being an idiot. So if you get frustrated when someone's being an idiot, you might not love it because she's an idiot a lot. Next, I have The Favorites by Lane Fargo. And honestly, I've thought a lot about moving this because I read this book in August and thought it was fine. Then I watched the Olympics and I started thinking about it a lot, about ice dancing and about all the drama that's involved in these pair sports and all the romance and broken hearts and all that. And I thought it would be really fun to read this in like January, like right before the Olympics started, or even during the Olympics when I was watching all the ice dancing and pair skating and all that. But alas, I read it in August. This is a Wuthering Heights retelling, which also I don't love Wuthering Heights, if I'm being super honest. I had to read it, I think 3 times for school, and it just never loved it. But if you loved ice dancing this Olympics, you should read this book. After that, I have The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This is a thriller about a woman whose husband like leaves her a bag of money and tells her to take care of her stepdaughter, and then she and her stepdaughter are trying to figure out what the heck's going on. This is a very weird ending that I didn't love, but the thriller portion of it's pretty good. And next we have The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. This was kind of like that movie Ready or Not, but less violent. It's this really uber wealthy family and you have to like play these games, and about a woman who gets engaged into the family and her trying to figure out how she's going to survive living in this family. And then I have The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. This was a historical fiction. And this is, again, a book I got a really long time ago, so it's hard for me to remember particulars, but I think it took place in the 1920s and the 1970s. We have 2 timelines. In this house that's now a museum in New York City. And in the first timeline, our narrator is a woman who was an artist's model, but is pretending to be a lady's maid because something's happening. I can't remember what, but she needs to like hide for a little bit. Or she's being a companion, not a lady's maid, for this like eccentric wealthy woman. And then in the 1970s, it's a woman who's doing a photo shoot at the same house. And I liked it. The Future Saints by Ashley Winstead. I just read this and talked about it on my channel. This is a like fake biography of a band that goes viral in like 2024 and how fame affects them. I think if you're into the music scene right now, you'd probably really enjoy this. For me, I'm like, you know, middle-aged and like, I still listen to music a lot, but like I think I would have liked this better if it was set in the 90s. But if you're like really into today's music and how like TikTok helps musicians, you'd probably really like this story. And then we have A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. What I loved about this is a standalone fantasy for adults. There's no YA vibes. One of our narrators is like, I want to say like 50-year-old woman. And it's a retelling of Goose Girl? I can't remember what it's a retelling of. It's a retelling of a weird Grimm's fairy tale. Which one is it? It doesn't say. But basically there's this woman who's a young woman whose mother can kind of control her because she's a sorceress. And she's trying to make this older man fall in love with her because they need to be taken care of. And that man's sister can realize there's something off. She's the 50-year-old narrator. And so we get the young woman whose mother is horribly evil, and then the older woman whose brother is maybe under a spell. And it was good. I really enjoyed it. It just started raining. Oh, it's hailing! Okay, it's just baby hailing. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Fun read. Small Angels by Lauren Owen. This is the only cottage gore book I've ever read. I read this one a long time ago, but it is about this woods that is like a living, breathing entity and how careful you have to be with it and how the woods has people that are favorites and people that are not. And I really enjoyed this, but it's one of those like quiet, creeping, sort of like slightly horror. I think it was under Gothic for the genre. But it's enjoyable. And then we have The Great Divide by Christina Enriquez. This book, it's so hard because there are certain books that I have lower, like we're in the middle of the list at this point, I want to say. Yeah, maybe close to halfway through. And this book has stayed with me. It's about the building of the Panama Canal, and you follow so many narrators, which is the only reason I don't have it higher, because there are just narrators I wanted to spend more time with, but because you follow so many people, you just didn't really get to spend that much time with it. But you follow everyone from an American doctor who's working on like malaria treatment to a woman who is from, I want to say Barbados, who's there trying to earn money because her sister needs an operation, to young men who are from the countryside who are trying to earn money for their family. If you like a historical fiction that's like really of its time, like of a specific time, really well researched, I think this would be a great read for you. I do remember when I reviewed this, I was like, it was kind of a hard read because I read this right when I found out one of my daughters is allergic to mosquitoes. And so it was kind of hard to read the malaria stuff for me. But it's one of those books that I just still think about a lot. And this is the last book in the liked, and then we will go into the loved section. And it is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This is a cute, cozy, romantic comedy about a witch who lives in Georgia, and the guy who broke her heart when she was 20 comes back. And when he broke her heart when she was 20, she like did a fake spell on him, but the spell actually worked, that basically everything was going to go wrong around him. And it's cute and fun. And I'm going to be super honest, when I read this the first time, I thought it was fine, but then I listened to the Heaving Bosoms podcast on it, and I now listen to that episode every October. Next, we have The Family by Naomi Kroputsky. And we're going to be honest with you, this I think was the third book I got. And I don't remember a lot about it other than it's what it's like growing up in the mafia from the point of view of two young girls. And I think it starts when they're sick and ends when they're like 35. So you see their childhood, their teen years, their 20s, and like their motherhood through the lens of being in a mob family. Next, I have This Spells Love by Kate Robb. This is a romantic comedy that has some magic in it, but doesn't really have witchiness in it, which is what I thought it would when I got it. But it's about a woman who like does a fake spell where she wishes she never met the guy that just broke her heart, but she doesn't realize she met her best friend, who's a guy, the same day. And so then she wakes up and she's in this other life in which that guy that broke her heart doesn't exist, but like she also doesn't have her best friend. And then she kind of meets him again, like a second time, and sees what would happen if she had gone with him instead of the guy who broke her heart. The spice was spicing in this one in a good way. It's not like super spicy, but I thought that she wrote spicy scenes very well. As a romance author, I'm always really impressed. Okay, so I have 2 books by the same author back to back, and then a 3rd book by that author in a couple minutes. And so we're just going to talk about them together. But I have No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall, followed by What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. And No One Can Know is about 3 sisters who their parents died when they were young, and the whole town thinks the oldest sister did it, and she moves away, but then she and her boyfriend, unexpectedly, she's pregnant, they both lose their jobs, and he's like, well, don't you own your family home? Like, can't we go stay there? And so she decides to go live in the town where everyone thinks she murdered her parents. Good. What Lies in the Woods is about 3 friends that were attacked when they were teens, and something younger than teens. I think they're like 11 or 12. One of them was, when they were all together, and they lied about what happened, and now their lie is sort of bubbling to the surface now that they're in their 20s. It's still hailing, just little tiny hail. Next, I have The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. I talked about her book, The Amalfi Curse. This one is about a woman who does seances and another woman whose sister is murdered, and the sister used to work for the woman who does seances, and so she gets involved in that world to try and figure out what happened to her sister. And it's a sapphic love story. All right, First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. I read this for book club, which was very nice. I love when my book club books were, oh my gosh, I still have my book club post-it note, so I remember everyone's name. But it's about a woman who's kind of like a professional, expensive con woman, and she wants to get out of the life. And then she's at a party and a woman introduces herself to her as that woman's real name. And it goes from there. And it was twisty and turny and fun, and my book club loved it. Then I have Northwoods by Amy Peace. I got this because I love the Northwoods, like northern Wisconsin and Minnesota and parts of northern Michigan, where you got like that dense woods. And it's about a cop who has a lot of problems. And he is struggling with substance abuse and PTSD. And then a teenage boy is found killed from like a wealthy area of summer homes near him, and he has to solve the murder. And the best thing, this was called a crime novel, I think. And the best thing I can say to describe this is it was like watching a procedural. So if you like Law and Order, like that kind of show, that's really what reading this felt like. It didn't feel like a thriller or a mystery. It really felt like that. Let's do another Kate Alice Marshall, Killing Cold. This is about a woman who has to go stay on a mountain with her wealthy fiance's family, and a lot of crazy stuff is happening, but she's also like remembering this mountain, like she's been here before, and sort of feels like she's losing her mind. It was fun. If you like a locked house, she's like on a locked mountain. All right, we've got Hera by Jennifer Saint. I've read all of Jennifer Saint's books, which there's another one in this pile somewhere. But 2 of them I think were not through Book of the Month. I think I bought 2 of them. Yeah, they're over there. This is my least favorite Jennifer Saint I've ever read, but it's still very beautiful. She does mythology retellings. So when she announced she was doing a Hera retelling, I was a little like, Hera's the worst, because she is. She blames a bunch of women her husband basically rapes, and yeah. So you get Hera's point of view. I didn't love Hera's point of view, but the last 50 pages of this book are golden. They're golden. No one can end a book like Jennifer Saint. I feel like she can just end a book so well. And so I had to put it this high because the end was just so good. But you do have to get through a book from Hera's point of view, where she is, turning women into cows. Next, we have A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang. This is a folklore retelling, I want to say. Or a fairy tale retelling? No. Mythology retelling. Inspired by a legend retelling. The legend of Xishi, Xishi, who is like a beautiful, beautiful woman. And her beauty is used to bring down the neighboring kingdoms. This is a tragic love story. My only complaint about this, because I did really enjoy this book, is that this was the author's first adult book, I believe. She usually writes YA, and you could tell, because there's a lot, like this woman is basically forced into being a prostitute for the king of the neighboring kingdom. And there's not a lot of depth into what that actually means for her. It's really brushed over. And then she wakes up in his bed every day, and you don't really go into how that would actually probably be horrible for her. So that was only my negative. I think it's very beautiful. If you like legend retellings, mythology retellings, you probably love it. We're moving now. Am I going to split this into 2 videos? I probably should. Okay. Now we're getting into some really fun reads. Yes, we are. The Haunting of Payne's Hollow by Kelly Armstrong. I didn't know if I was going to like this book. This book was scary. It's a paranormal thriller. It's got Legend of Sleepy Hollow vibes. There's like ghouls walking around and scary horses. And the whole book, I was on edge, but I loved it because usually I don't like scary books. I'm a baby when it comes to scary books, but this was a good one. This is a good fall read. You're on the water. There's weird stuff coming out of the lake. And you're just trying to live through the night. The actual premise is that this woman inherits her grandfather's house, and she's only allowed to actually inherit it if she stays there for 30 days without leaving while wearing a ankle monitor, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen while she's there. Here's another Locked Mountain, Where He Left Me by Nicole Bart. This is about a woman who's meeting her husband, relatively newish husband, at his like family home on the mountains, and then he never shows up. And she doesn't know what's going on, and she tries to find out where he is, and she just can't find him, and then a horrible storm comes in. And I thought there were going to be like people trying to break into her house, but what ends up happening is she finds 2 children who are not doing well on the property, and she's trying to figure out who the kids are and where they came from. It was good. Breathless by Amy McCulloch. If you have someone in your life that loved Into Thin Air, they'd probably like this book. It's basically a thriller. Is it snowing now? Oh my God. It is snowing now. It's basically a thriller that takes place on a mountainside. Makes sense that it just started snowing because this is very treacherous. So it's what you would imagine. Here's another book that I think about all the time, and that's Blackwood's Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. I had read The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey such a long time ago, like I think before I got married. And she writes in sort of like a haunting, magical realism sort of way. This takes place in Alaska. And I'm going to say this because it sounds crazy. It is magical realism. It's about a woman who falls in love with a bear shifter. But it's not like a romance bear shifter. Like when he's a bear, he's a bear. And it's really upsetting and sad, but also like beautiful. And really reminded me of why like I have to live within 30 minutes of a hospital. I could never live in these like backwoods areas where people do live, but really beautiful. A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham is my next one. She had another book in here somewhere. This was one of the books of the year in 2022, and I picked it as my pick for my free one. This is about a woman who, when she was in middle school or high school, several girls in her town went missing and then were killed, and her father confessed to the crime. And it's about her later in her life. She's getting married, and she's kind of grappling with it, but also realizing that maybe she missed something back then. I did enjoy it. All right, the book that started it all with my newfound love of thrillers where a podcaster is involved somehow. It's Dark Corners by Megan Golden. This is about a podcaster who's been following this criminal. And then the police approach her because this random influencer is missing, and she had visited the criminal right before going missing. And so the FBI and this podcaster are trying to find her. And it was really cool exploring like how these influencers' lives can be completely fake, and that you'd have no idea that that it was completely fake. And I enjoyed it. I read it really quickly. I remember I read this on vacation. Next, I have Middle Tide by Sarah Crouch. This was another crime fiction set in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember it very well. I know there's a guy who a dead body is found on his property, and he's insisting he's not doing it. But other than that, I don't remember much. But I remember it was moody and very like Pacific Northwest. Next, I have Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is a Locked Island mystery in which this really dysfunctional family all goes to this island on Halloween. And when the tide's in, it's an island. When the tide's out, there's a way out. And it's about the hours in which the tide is in. And they're dropping one by one. It's very, and then there were none. House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen was a cool one. This is about a woman whose job it is to sort of represent a child during a terrible divorce. And our narrator is representing this kid whose parents are going through a really bad divorce. And at the same time, his nanny, I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl, but I think it's a boy. No, it's a girl, representing this little girl whose nanny died recently when she fell, jumped, was pushed off the 3rd floor of their house. And this woman who's a lawyer is trying to figure out, while she's talking to this kid, first of all, who she should live with, but second of all, maybe one of these people in the house killed the nanny. And it's really good and engaging, and it was very twisty and turny. After that, I have The Wild Huntress by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is a YA book and reminded me of the YA I used to absolutely adore. It's a retelling of a Welsh collection of legends that I'm not going to be able to pronounce, and I don't think is even in here. So I'm not going to try. Maybe I'll write it out for you. But it's about the wild hunt and 3 people that are trying to win the wild hunt. A woman who can see monsters because she has a weird thing with her eye from when she was a baby. And then a prince whose family is all sort of magical and in charge. And then lastly, a kid who was raised by monsters. And he's not a kid anymore. They're all like young adults, and it was good. I enjoyed this. It was like a good step back into the fantasy, the YA fantasy I loved in like the early 2000s, like the 2000 to 2010 time period. Okay, next we have The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, which I would say was the book of the summer in 2024. It's really sad. Go in knowing that. You jump between so many different time periods and you have a lot of different narrators, but the premise is that there's a missing kid at a summer camp, and the kid is the child of the owners of the summer camp. And 10-ish years earlier, no, more than that, 15-ish years earlier, another one of their kids went missing and was never found. And I'm just going to tell you, the end of this book is so sad. So go in knowing that. Completely different vein. Wilderness of Stars by Shane Earnshaw. This is another YA. This is a really interesting book because Shay Earnshaw is really good at, when you're reading her books, you're like, where are we? And when are we? Because you don't know till the end of this book where you are or when you are. But it's about this girl who knows she's the last astronomer, and she knows once something happens in the sky that she needs to start walking to a specific place. And it's about her journey. And I bounced between thinking that it was like 1850, that we were in a fantasy world, that it's the future, that it's just, you're all over the place, but I really liked it. My back is not good enough for all this sitting on the floor. We come upon our first Adrienne Young. Now this is why I belong to Book of the Month, because I didn't know this author. And I've gotten 3 of her books, and they're all coming up soon. And they're all so good. They're all so good. So I wasn't sure if this book was going to be too hard for me to read because it's about a woman who has a very unnatural connection to her twin brother, and he dies. And she goes back to their town to sort of figure out what happened to him. And I have twins, so sometimes twin stuff is hard for me because of that, especially when there's a death. But it was so beautiful, and the love story in this is so beautiful, and the setting is so beautiful, and it was as sad as reading anything in which someone's lost a sibling, but a great book. Okay, Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This was a book that when I read, I thought, oh, if I had read this in 2007, it would have been my personality for the rest of the year. It's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but it also has other aspects. So there's 3 stories in this book. One in which this young woman has become a moneylender, and they say she can turn silver to gold because she's really good at investing money and figuring out how to make more money. And then this elf prince kidnaps her. He's like the Rumpelstiltskin. But at the same time, there's also the Tsarina, who's married to the Tsar, who's possessed by a demon. And there's also this woman who's living in poverty, whose story we follow as well. But it was just one of those books where you think oh, young me would have been in love. Next, we have Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manansala. I lent that to someone and never got it back. That's a really fun, cozy mystery about a young woman who's back in her hometown solving a mystery that has to do with restaurants. And it was super fun. It's one of the first books I read from Book of the Month, so I'm not doing justice on the plot, but I really enjoyed it. Next, I have Advika and the Hollywood Wives by Kirthana Ramasetti. I also lent that book out. And this one is really fun, and I think if you liked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but you wanted something that was a little lighter, you would really like this book. It's about a young woman who's kind of flailing in life. Her twin sister has died recently, a lot of twins dying, and she's a screenwriter but just not getting anything working, and she's working at an event, and she meets this man who's a lot older than her as director, and they have a whirlwind romance. And he asks her to marry him, and she's like, sure. She's kind of she's not like in love with him, but she's like enough in like with him that she's like, I can do this with him. And when they've been married for like a month, one of his previous wives in her will says, I will give $1 million and I think it's the tape to whoever his current wife is to leave him. And then she goes from there, and she knows like nothing about his past. So that was fun. Okay, next up we have The Golden Couple by Sarah Pekkanen and Greer Hendricks. This is about a woman who's like a very unconventional therapist working with a couple who really, really hate each other. And it was a fun domestic thriller. Again, one of the first books I got from Book of the Month, so it's been a long time, but it was a very fun domestic thriller. Next up is My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney, and the only reason it's not here is because my husband is currently reading it. And I could have grabbed it off his bedside table, but then I forgot. I thought I might forget to put it back, and he might be like, did the kids move my book? So I just left it up there. This was super fun. This is about a woman who goes for a run, and she leaves her phone at home, and when she gets home, her key won't work in her door. She knocks on the door, and a woman who looks kind of like her answers it and is like, may I help you? And she's like, this is my house. And this woman's like, I have no idea who you are. And then the woman starts yelling for her husband, and her husband comes down, and he doesn't know who she is. And the story goes from there, and the ending is crazy. Here's another Adrienne Young, Spells for Forgetting. This is my first one I read a while ago. And it's about this island. It's very magical realism. It's about this island that's magical, and you can't really move it. And a big something happened a while ago. And there's this man who was a boy when this happened, who left when the big something happened, and he abandoned the girl he was in love with. And he has to go back to spread his mother's ashes, and he meets up with her. And it was really lovely. This is saying it's a fantasy read. I don't remember it being like hit you over the head with magic, but there is some magic. I would have thought it was magical realism. Up, we have another Shea Earnshaw, History of Wild Places. Again, where are we? When are we? What's happening? What is going on? We're in like a cult for most of this, and you really don't know where you are or when you are or who these people are, because there's stuff happening that you've heard of in the outside world, and you don't know if these people are people from the outside world, and are we 20 years later? Are we 30 years ago? It was fun. I made my husband read this book. You'll know that means I really liked it, because there's only a few books a year that I make him read, because he won't take more than that for recommendations from me. Next up, I have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which my brother-in-law currently has. I need to get it back from him. This was a fun podcasting thriller. So we have a podcaster who is pretty famous, and she meets a woman in the bathroom at a restaurant one night, and the woman is like, you should interview me. And it's both of their birthdays. And she's like, you should interview me. And the woman does. And then this woman's life ends up being insane, and she gets kind of embroiled in this crazy, crazy life. Next up, we have The Wedding People by Alison Espach, I think is how you say her name. My sister has that book right now. She told me she read it. She loved it like 2 months ago, but hasn't given it back yet. 'Tis the way. This was my pick, I think, for last year for Book of the Year. It's the one that I picked. I'm not 100% certain. I'm going to tell you what it's actually about, because the blurb doesn't really tell you what it's about, but it's a woman who goes to this really expensive hotel she's always wanted to go to in a very expensive dress to live out one day, just like living her best life. And then she's planning on killing herself that night. And she runs into a woman in the elevator who doesn't know who she is, because she booked the entire hotel for her wedding party. And she kind of admits to her that's what she's going to do. And this woman's like, you cannot do that the night before my wedding. It will ruin my wedding forever. And then she's like, you're going to hang out with us. And she's in this wedding party. And it was a really good read. But the beginning's depressing. The end is not. After that, we have The Stone Witch of Florence by Anna Rash. I really liked this book. It's about a woman who can use jewels to sort of heal people and do different things. And the plague is going on. And at the same time, there's kind of like this medieval mystery she has to solve with a monk. And I enjoyed it. It's a fun medieval romp. It's not that serious, but it was a fun medieval story. And then here we go, The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young, my favorite Adrienne Young. This is about a woman, June, who's from a family where everyone goes crazy or disappears. And she's starting to think she's going crazy, because she starts seeing this door and it's freaking her out. And then finally this family friend who's been friends with her family for decades is like, you have to go through the door. And she does. And I'm not giving away anything else, because it's such a lovely story. It's a quiet, beautiful story, and you just have to read it. because it's lovely. All right, after that, I have Swan Song by Ellen Hilderbrand. I am so excited that I did Book of the Month because of getting introduced to authors like Adrienne Young. And I'd never read an Ellen Hilderbrand, and now I've read like 14 of hers. But this was her last Nantucket book for now. And it really culminates a lot of the people we've met in other books. And I haven't read all of her books by any means, so there was some stuff in here I didn't necessarily understand. But it's about this new family that moves on to Nantucket, and the wife wants to be like the number one most important person. And so it's about her, and then also the woman she hires to be her personal assistant. And we jump around in time in this because it starts at the first chapter is about the end of the summer, in which their house is on fire and their personal assistant is missing. And then we go to the beginning of the summer and see what happens. And it was really fun. Let's move from fun to creepy. The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is about a pair of friends who are not friends anymore. And they both get accepted into this writing retreat by their favorite author, who's kind of insane. And when they get there, they've got this really rigorous writing schedule they have to adhere to. It's a locked house situation. There's a horrible storm, and there's some really bad stuff going on. And I loved it, twisty turny, but it was scary. I did have to stop halfway through because my husband had to go out of town for work, and I couldn't read it while he was gone. Now we have The Academy by Ellen Hilderbrand and Shelby Cunningham, her daughter. I really loved this book, which is indicative of how many books I get from Book of the Month that I really love, because there's still a lot to go. This is about a boarding school, and you have so many narrators. You have tons of different, not tons, but several narrators who are students. You have several narrators who are teachers. You have several narrators who are an admin, and you just follow life at this boarding school. At first, I was kind of like, how is Ellen Hilderbrand going to write a dark academia? It's not a dark academia. It's not a light academia. It's like a realistic academia. Her daughter, Shelby Cunningham, went to boarding school, and so she helped her a lot with like all the Gen Z slang, and at this point even Gen Alpha, because the kids talk like kids talk now. Like, you aren't gonna have that sort of like old school, I don't know, like old money like boarding school kids who talk like it's 1985. It's like kids who talk like kids now and have TikTok and all that. So some of the reviews were like they didn't love that. I didn't mind it. I mean, my oldest is 12, so I have a little bit of that slang happening in my life already, but I really enjoyed this. It made me so happy because when Ellen Hilderbrand said she wasn't going to write any more Nantucket books, I was bummed. And I was like, oh, are we even going to like this? Loved it. All right, next, a book that I think I lent to my husband's aunt. It's called Woman of Light by Kali Fajardo Anstein. And it's a really beautiful story of a indigenous native family in the American West. I think we were in like Wyoming or Colorado, and I can't remember. This is one I read a long time ago, but it's one of those stories where you follow a family for a long time. So part of the story is the story of like our main character's grandfather. It's the 1930s. They're dealing with what it means to be alive in the 1930s and also to be indigenous in the 1930s. And it was just a really beautiful book. I remember I finished reading this when I was at the park with my kids and I cried. And that seems like such a long time ago. It came out in June of 2022. So it came out almost 4 years ago, and I still remember crying at the park. How many tops are we on right now? What are we on? 28. So here's your top 28 out of, I think, 110. I just finished this book. I haven't even reviewed it on my channel yet, but I loved it. It's called This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crum. It is about a pair of best friends who are podcasters, and they have like a comedy podcast about like weird survival stories. And then one of the podcasters goes missing, and the police think the other podcaster might be the one to blame. But it's also a really great story about a long friendship, and a story about a marriage, not theirs obviously because they're not married, and a story about what it's like living with narcolepsy, which was really cool. Number 27, watch my numbers be wrong. The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hilderbrand. This is the second Ellen Hilderbrand I ever read. I think that's correct. It's about a woman whose husband dies suddenly in a car accident, and she's kind of trying to figure out what the heck she's going to do with her life. And she decides to do this thing. She read an article about it called the 5-Star Weekend, about how you invite your 5 best friends from different points of your life and have a weekend with them. And she does that, and it goes, as crazy as you'd imagine. If you think about, like, if you're this woman's in her 50s. I'm in my 40s. But if I think about, my high school best friend, my college best friend, my best friend from my 20s, my best friend from my 30s, my best friend now, they're all wildly different people. And so what it would look like if I forced all of them to go to Nantucket for the weekend, we'd probably have a good time, I would guess, but it's super fun. Here's a book that's really stuck with me, Siren Queen by Nevo. Nevo is such a unique writer because I think she writes fantasy in a really new and interesting way. Like there's nothing in her fantasy that feels like, yeah, that makes sense. All of her fantastical creatures and objects just always surprise me. I also read her short novella series, the Singing Hills series, which is phenomenal. This one is about kind of like if you imagine old Hollywood was a mythology and she wrote it. And it's about a woman who is an actress at that time and she's of Asian descent and she has a rule that she's not going to do a funny accent and she's not going to play a maid. And there's one other thing. I'm going to see if I can find it. She doesn't want to play a fainting flower, and how she figures out how she's going to live in Hollywood. And it's really beautiful. And it's a short read. Like you can read this very fast. Okay. Taylor Jenkins Reid has entered the chat. Daisy Jones and the Six. If I read this and if I had told you that I was going to read several more Taylor Jenkins Reid books that I liked even more than that, I would have been surprised because this is the first one I read. I don't think I'm going to have to talk much about this. I think most people know what this is, but it's a story of a band in the 70s, I believe, and it's told as interviews. So it's a really fast read because of that, because everything's an interview. And you just learn about the drama of this band. And it was really fun and really fast to read. Next, I have the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. This is about a woman who's a blogger, and she is interviewing this very eccentric older woman who I think like 50 years ago, I don't remember exactly how many years ago. 40 years ago? 40 years ago, was not convicted of murdering these two men, but everyone believes she murdered these two men. And so we're bouncing between the past and the present with this crime blogger interviewing her and what actually happened in the past. And I really love Simone St. James. There's a different one of her books that's a little bit higher up, but this is a very good one too. Next, I have Daughter of Mine by Megan Miranda. My brother-in-law has that right now. He's had it for a while. Hopefully he's read it and is going to return it soon. I really like this thriller. The premise is there's this woman. She has moved away from home. Home is North Carolina. I don't remember exactly where she's moved to, but her father has died and he has left her the house, which is a big deal because she is not his biological child and he didn't start raising her till she was like 11, I think. And she has two brothers who are his biological children. She comes home and at the same time, there's been this horrible drought. So their lake is starting to dry up and they're finding all these cars. And she's trying to figure out what actually happened to her mother and thinks there might be a clue in her father's house because her mother just abandoned her one night, but had written her a note that said like daughter of mine before she left. And so she never knows what happened to her mom. I really enjoyed it. It was a great thriller. After that, we have one of the saddest books on this list. That's saying something because I do cry a lot. I mean, there's some more too. There's a lot left that I cried during, but it's Shark Heart by Emily Hayback. I think this was billed as magical realism, but I'd really call it an allegory because it's about living in a world in which some people have this genetic mutation where they will just turn into an animal. And some of these animals are like hamsters and you can keep them in the house. And some of these animals are predators and you have to say goodbye to them forever. And the main story is about a woman whose husband is slowly turning into a great white shark. And I know that sounds insane, but to me, I read it as symbolic for Alzheimer's and it broke my heart. But it was so beautiful, but like cried so hard reading this book. The winner for favorite cover ever, and pretty high on the list, I totally lost count of where we are, no idea. Wayward by Emily Hart. This cover is spring. So 3 timelines in this of women on the same bloodline. We're in 2019 with Kate. She is running away from an abusive husband in London. In 1619, we're with Altha, who is awaiting her trial for witchcraft. And in 1942, we're with Violet, who is kind of stuck at her family's estate because her father is horrible, basically. And you follow these three women, and this is a magical realism, they have this sort of uncanny connection to birds and insects. And they're all go through some terrible stuff. Content warning for this one, there is first person POV of a sexual assault. That's pretty rough. I did love the book though, beyond that, but women being treated badly is sort of a marker of this book, so proceed with caution. Time for another Taylor Jenkins read. It's Malibu Rising. Malibu Rising, I didn't think I would like, but that's kind of the name of the game with Taylor Jenkins read books. Every time I read one and I read what it's about, I'm like, I don't know if I'm really gonna like this. I don't really like the 80s, and it's 83, which is the year I was born, in California, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm really gonna like this, but you don't stay in the 80s. A lot of it's in the 80s, but you do jump to the 50s and 60s, and basically it's about the Riva kids. So there are these 4 kids, and their dad had a very small part in Evelyn Hugo, the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which we'll get to in a little bit. And it's about them living in California, and it's about their a big party they have, and each of them have a lot of stuff going on, and I just really loved this story. It was a really good family story, and you really felt like these siblings cared about each other, and it was great. Okay, I have some questions for you by Rebecca Makkai. Okay, this is a lit fic book. I know some people didn't like it because they think it's a thriller. It's not a thriller. It's a lit fic book with thriller vibes. I feel like every lit fic has to have vibes. It either has historical fiction vibes, or it has contemporary fiction vibes, or whatever, fantasy, whatever. This is lit fic with thriller vibes. It's about a woman who is a really successful podcaster, and she goes back to her boarding school at her alma mater to teach a class on podcasting. And she has this class that says she's like, your assignment is that I want you to come up with a podcast idea, but it has to be something to do with the school. And one of the students is like, I want to do the murder of this former student. And the woman who's running the class is like, okay, she was my roommate. Not when she died, but the year before. And so we go back in her memories, and you go back and figure out what happened. And there's a man in jail right now for the murder, and you just kind of try and figure out what happened. Did he actually kill her? Did someone else kill her? It's a really good story. All right. The Hotel Nantucket by Ellen Hildebrand. I gave it to my mom. She hasn't returned it yet. I'm pretty sure she finished it 2 years ago. But it's my first Ellen Hildebrand. And I got it kind of on a whim because everyone had been telling me her stuff was good. But I was really anti the beach read for a long time. I think because for a while in my 20s, I read nothing but epic fantasy. So I was like, I'm not going to like a beach read. And you know what? I read that book and I loved it. And it's just about a hotel, June, July, and August on Nantucket, and the people who work at the hotel. And it was really interesting and fun and funny, but also hard stuff happens and sad stuff happens. It was what I think a great contemporary fiction book is. And here we go, the first Jennifer Saint I read, Ariadne. It's about Ariadne. Ariadne is interesting because she is the sister of the Minotaur, who's that half bull, half man person. And then she's also becomes the wife of Dionysus. So you follow her whole life. And as I said, no one can end a book like Jennifer Saint, because I was crying my face off at the end of this book. Great mythology retelling. Now we come to my favorite Taylor Jenkins reads ever, which is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. My sister has it. I gave it to her a year ago, and I just asked her if she had read it yet, and she said no. And then I pitched it to her. She goes, oh my God, I'll start it tonight. So hopefully she's reading it right now. This is a story of a Hollywood starlet who's been married 7 times, and she invites this woman to come interview her about her 7 husbands. And first I was like, I'm not gonna like that book. Love that book. I read it New Year's Eve. I don't remember which year, because I definitely got it as a backlist pick. And I started it on the 30th. I'll finish this next year. It's fine. And then I spent all of New Year's Eve morning reading it and crying ugly tears before our New Year's Eve party, which our New Year's Eve party is just me, my husband, and my children all wear something sparkly and eat a lot of food. So it was fine. It was fine that I had a puffy face, but it's a beautiful book. Now we're really getting into the books that I still talk about and I feel had an effect on my life. Those books that you really feel changed something in you, who knows what. And we're going to start with Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. I had read Garden Spells by her before this. I liked that book. I loved this book. It takes place in September, but you're in South Carolina, so it very much feels like a summer book. And it's about this condo complex and the people who live there and just the hard stuff they're getting over in their lives. And it's very magical realism. One of the main characters has like an invisible bird that I think symbolizes her trauma. And another main character whose mother has died recently, he was adopted as an older child. And she has died recently, and she was a baker, and he keeps finding like cornmeal on him because it's like her way of watching over him. And it's just a lovely little book that I think you should really read, especially in the summer. It's great. When I read the description of The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, I thought it was a book that was written for me because it's basically like, hi, would you want to read a book that's like about this woman who's supposed to have an internship at the Met, but then it gets messed up and she ends up at the Cloisters, which is a museum of medieval art in New York City. And they're like researching the oldest tarot deck known to man. Okay, yes, I do want to read all of that. This is a fantastic twist and I adored it. Family drama story. Banyan Moon by Tao Tai. I loved this book. It's about 3 generations of women. There's like the granddaughter, the mom, and the grandmother, and you read about each of their lives intertwined. And there's this house in Florida, I want to say, with a huge banyan tree, which is where they like go home to when bad things are happening. And we start with the granddaughter who's living, I think, in Michigan and gets accidentally pregnant. So she goes home to decide what she's going to do. And then you also find out about her parents' marriage and about what her grandma's life was like before she immigrated to the United States and she was a refugee. And it was such a wonderful intergenerational family story that I really recommend it if you like those kinds of books. Let's go to another book that made me cry. The Fox Wife by Yangsze Choo. So I had read The Ghost Bride by her, and I really enjoyed that, but not as much as I loved this. This is about foxes in Chinese mythology, and there are shapeshifters, and you follow these foxes over hundreds of years. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's also like a historical fiction, and it's such a beautiful, heart-rendering, is that the right word? What does it mean when they just squeezes your heart till you can't breathe? Because that is how this book read. And if you like folklore or retelling, stuff like that, I think this is really one that you'll enjoy. Okay, so this is kind of odd because we're going to do this one first. But next I have Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, which is the second book in the Divine Rivals. So this is the conclusion of Divine Rivals. I can't really tell you much about it without giving stuff away. So Divine Rivals is in a couple books. We'll talk about it then. This one made me cry really hard though also. Okay, we've made it to the top 10. So these are my top 10 books from Book of the Month. And I'm just looking over them. And they really are 10 books I still talk about, which I think is really the marker of a great read, is when you can't stop talking about it. This one, number 10, just came out this year, and it's Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. A different Charlotte McConaghy book in here was my introduction to her, which has also made me read Migrations and then Wild Dark Shore. And these are honestly some of my favorite books in the world. Charlotte McConaghy can write like no one else. This story is about an island. And it's an island near Antarctica, and we're at like a global crisis, and plant life is just dying. And it's about a seed bank and a family taking care of the seed bank, and the island is drowning, and they have to decide which seeds they're going to save. And at the same time, this woman washes ashore on their island and survives, and they have to figure out why she's there. And it's lovely, and I cried, and it won Book of the Year. Rightfully so, for Book of the Month in 2025, because it's really just a beautiful story. And Charlotte McConaghy has this ability to write books that are so full of despair, but also so full of hope. I'd read anything she wrote. I can't wait till she has another one come out. I'm sure it'll take a couple years though, because I cannot imagine what an undertaking it is for her to write these. Okay, next we have a thriller. Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This is another podcasting thriller, which is my jam now. And it's about a woman who something horrible happened 10-ish years ago, and her whole town thinks she murdered her best friend. And she doesn't know what happened. She walked out of the woods with a traumatic brain injury, holding a stick covered with blood, and her friend was dead in the woods. But they couldn't actually tie her to the murder. They don't know if someone had attacked them both independently or if she actually killed her friend. But she comes home because there's going to be a podcast about it. And as she gets home, she starts remembering things that happened. and I loved it. The thing I love the most about this, really made it stand out, is there's that whole thing about like after someone's died, and everyone says like they lit up a room, they were the nicest person you've ever met, and she's giving us realistic memories of her friend who was kind of a bitch, but also like fiercely loyal and would like tell her when she was being an idiot, and that was my favorite part of it. So good. I really hope this gets optioned because the climax of this would be fantastic on film. Next up, Mame by Jessica George. Oh, this book again made me cry. This was such a good book about what it feels like to be in your 20s. So Mame is a woman who kind of feels like she doesn't have a place because she's the daughter of, I want to say Ghanaian immigrants. Yes, Ghanaian immigrants living in London. And in London, she feels Ghanaian, and in Ghana, she feels British. And a big part of her life is taking care of her father with Parkinson's. And then her mom comes back. Her mom does not live with her family. She lives in Ghana. Her mom comes back and basically says, live your life. You don't have to take care of your dad anymore. I will. And the story goes from there with her dealing with what it means and has meant to her to take care of her father, what it means to sort of let go of that responsibility. And it's sad. It's sad. It's a sad book. But it's also beautiful at the end. Let's keep going. I'm just looking 1, 2, 3, 4. Out of the next 7 books, 4 made me cry. Probably this one the hardest. The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This is a big reimagining, and if you don't like stuff messing with Christianity, you probably won't like it. I don't mind. I'm very much a lapsed Catholic. This is about the wife of Jesus. So it's really about the point of view of a woman living in the time period of Jesus and what life would look like. And it's really beautiful, but we know how it ends. So it's also really sad. But I really recommend if you like historical fiction, especially ancient, because I actually really enjoy ancient historical fiction, and there isn't that much. This is a great piece of ancient historical fiction. Okay, we've hit it. Divine Rivals. For someone who doesn't really like YA very much, I absolutely loved this book, cried a ton, and it's kind of like fantasy World War I. The vibe is World War I with the trench warfare, and there's typewriters that are magic, and they're like passing letters to each other. And at its core, it's a love story amidst a war backdrop. But the war is that there are 2 gods fighting, and people are getting called by these gods to fight for either side. And then you have Iris and Roman, who are war correspondents reporting on the front. And it's a great, really emotional read, to the point that I've actually said, I think if this is made into a series, I won't watch it because I was so like swept up in it for such a long time. And I don't like that feeling. We've made it to the top 5. Okay. Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I remember when I picked this book, which was August 2021, and I had joined Book of the Month in July of 2021 and hadn't loved the first book in my bottom 10. And I got this book because I told myself I was not going to get a fantasy. And so I got this, which I think was billed as contemporary fiction, and I read it in one day. I couldn't put it down. It's about the reintroduction of wolves into the Scottish Highlands, but it's really about this woman who's doing it and her relationship with her twin sister. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but it was so good. I do think I should maybe reread this. I told one of my neighbors to read this, but I'm not lending it to him because I don't think he'll return it to me. Number 4, The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This was one of those thrillers that just stays with you. It's about our narrator Fiona in 2014. Her sister was murdered, I think it's like 20 years earlier, and it just hasn't set right with it. Her sister's boyfriend at the time is in jail, and she believes he did it, but she just doesn't believe she knows everything that happens. And so she's kind of like snooping around on the grounds of this closed boarding school, which is where her sister's body was found, and she finds a skeleton. And then the rest of the book takes place, we bounce back and forth. It takes place in the 1950s about a bunch of girls who are going to school at this school for wayward girls type of place. And you don't know which one of them is the skeleton. Loved it. Okay, top 3. The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. I love Alice Hoffman. And this book is so good. I think it's probably my favorite Alice Hoffman. I really also enjoyed The Dove Keepers very much, but I think it might be this one. This is a hard book to kind of describe because it's fantasy and it's like bizarre fantasy, but we follow this woman who's very young. She's a teen, I should say, this teenager, who gets pregnant out of wedlock and then ends up in this cult. And then we follow her daughter, who is going to the public library because it's like the only place she can get respite. And she falls in love with the book, The Scarlet Letter, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. And then in the second half of the book, she meets Nathaniel Hawthorne. So you have to sort of think about it in that way. There's like a time travel aspect. This book was so beautiful. I should reread this book because I loved it. That's how I'm going to feel about the rest of these books. And this, I also thought this was, again, one of my favorite covers. It was just a perfect cover for the story. Okay, number 2 is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. Oh my God, I love this book. I still recommend this book all the time to people. This is a historical fiction about a real woman who was a midwife in early America in, I think, Maine or Massachusetts, Maine. And she's important because she never lost a mother. Now, she delivered stillborns and babies that didn't survive because it is 90 something. But she is one of those midwives who was so good at her job that none of the moms who delivered with her ever died. And this is heavy subject matter because at the big part of this book is that there is a man who is accused of rape who is found dead in the river. And she is sort of like working as a coroner on it. And then a lot of this book is about sexual assault. And so you have to know that going in because it is rough. It's rough subject matter. And talking about how these women get over, you can get over it, but get through it is probably the better way to say it. And she has such a lovely, wonderful love story with her husband. She's been married for a long time. She's had several children, and she's had several children die. And it's just such a good read. If I could just tell you to read this book, wonderful. And then last, my number 1 book of the month, book of all time, will be no surprise. It is Circe by Madeline Miller. I loved this book. I think this is one of those books that no matter when I had read it in my life, it would have been one of the best books I'd ever read in my life. It's a mythology retelling of Circe, who we know from the Odyssey, but you follow her for thousands of years, and you follow her through her relationships with her siblings and her relationships with men and her relationship with Odysseus and all these different things that happen to her, and it's just gorgeous. And no one is surprised when I say that a book by Madeline Miller is one of the best books I've ever read because she is a dream author. I was taking a writing class a few years ago, I think in 2021, maybe 2022. And one of the, it was specific to prose. And one of the assignments we had was to bring a paragraph of really good writing, what you felt like really good writing was. And I brought a paragraph from here. And I remember just thinking, I don't even know, do I have it marked? Yes, I have it marked. And I remember thinking that I could literally pick any paragraph in this book. But I picked a phenomenal one. And when I read it out loud, my professor goes, I've been told I should read Madeline Miller, but I haven't read any of her books yet. And now I'm definitely going to pick Circe up. And I was like, yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. Oh my word. 110 books done. You should see how messy my floor is right now because it's crazy. I might try and take a quick overhead shot for you so I can show you how crazy it looks. Look at all these piles of books. And look at all these Post-it notes of the ones that I had lent or sold already. Oh my word. So that is every book I've gotten from Book of the Month over the past, when did I start? Oh gosh. Oh, here. Where's Once There Were Wolves? 2021 is when I started, and it's 2026. Now, I have slowed down. The first couple years, I definitely bought a lot more books, and now I skip months often. But when I started my Book of the Month journey, I wanted to stop reading only romance and fantasy, and I think I've done a very good job. I have very little romance on this. I still have a bit of fantasy, but I have a ton of thrillers. I have a ton of historical fiction, contemporary fiction, magical realism, everything else you can think of. Lit fic, YA, crime fiction, all those different genres, and it really helped me branch out. If you are interested in Book of the Month, and I should have said this at the beginning of the video, I will put a coupon code in the description. Use it. Thank you. Now, are you a member? What's the best book you've ever gotten from Book of the Month? Because I did think about this for a long time. I've been literally putting this list together for months. I mean, I've read 10 extra books since when I originally decided I was going to do it. So it's been a while. Now, I got to go clean this up. As always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. And I'll see you soon.